Hello, everyone, and welcome to our 12:30 session. We'll probably wait another minute just to let everybody sort of flow in who's coming in, and then we'll get started. I hope everyone's Friday Eve has been going well. Also want to apologize. I'm nursing a little bit of a sore throat, so I'm sorry if I sound a little stuffy today.
Oh no, I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you. All right, it's 12:32. I'm gonna say we get this show on the road. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're going to be talking about Lettersmith, a software developed at the Center for Academic Innovation here at U of M that is all about helping students be more cognitive about their writing and improve their writing skills. But first up, a few introductions. My name is James Alexander. I'm the Senior Software Ambassador for the Center for Academic Innovation. And basically that means I help faculty learn about and make use of all of the different software that we have built at the center. And Julie, I'll pass it off to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Hoy. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Information, and I've been working closely with the Center for Academic Innovation on this project.
So the first thing we sort of want to talk about is what is Lettersmith? So Lettersmith is a platform specifically designed to help students not only become better writers, but to also think more, critically might not be the right word, but like more metacognitively about what they're writing and how it fits into the formatting of whatever type of thing they're trying to write. So it sort of breaks down into three different components. There's the checklist or things that the instructor expects every piece of writing of this type to include. We're going to show you a demo of the platform a little bit later live, but the screenshot I'm showing you now is just a checklist for a cover letter, things that you might want to include. There needs to be a space for students to actually compose whatever they're working on. So we give them a space to write their cover letter or whatever communication it might be. And then the other key piece is examples. We gather examples not only from the instructor who has provided examples of different types of writing to us, but also for users who've used the platform. We gather their writing and can resurface it as an example so that when students are faced with creating whatever type of content it is that they need to create, they are not just given a list of all the things that it needs, but they're also given an example that has those specific aspects highlighted so they can have a better understanding of what their creation should include. And Lettersmith has been used in a bunch of different places on campus so far. I will say this is one of our newer tools. If I remember correctly, I think we launched it at the center in 2019. Does that sound right, Julie?
Yeah, I think I think it officially launched like January 2020.
January 2020. I knew it was like right before we all went remote. And so it's still a little bit early days as far as spreading across campus. But even with that being said, we found a lot of success in a lot of different writing environments. And one thing that I really want to get a lot more out of is trying to find more places where we can enhance writing of different types. Lettersmith started as a way to compose emails to clients, and some of our earliest use cases were the client-based courses listed here in SI. But as we realized that email wasn't the only thing that students could improve their writing on, we decided to start adding more features to support more kinds of writing. And now we have uses at career centers, both on our campus and exploring off campus, as well as other more official type of communication writing like technical comm, and also more informal writing like what we see in some of our English courses where they're doing more review type content. So we're going to go through a couple of these examples and sort of talk through what some of them use, and then we'll go through at the sort of end of our 30 minutes or 25 minutes a little bit of a demo of the application. And I do want to answer Carrie's first question right off the bat. So for on-campus use, there is no cost for Lettersmith. Every tool that we build at the Center for Academic Innovation is available for use on all 3 of the U of M campuses at no charge. Eventually, I could see a scenario where off campus there may be a licensing fee for a Lettersmith, but currently that is also not the case.
Yeah, I think the agreement is like, if you want to use it off campus, then it would be nice if you provide some feedback on like the design of the tool. But yeah, there's no official cost. I just wanted to add one thing to the overall layout, if we could go 2 slides back. So as like we were describing, this platform is used in many different contexts. And so what you see here is like a template for a cover letter where like the checklist items are related to a cover letter. The examples are examples of cover letters, but if you want to adopt it to a different context, let's say an essay writing course or an email writing course, then you as the instructor would change the items and define your own checklist items and decide what examples that you want to show. So it's not like those things are set in stone. Those are things that you can edit and choose for your context. Yeah, so we can go back to the example. So I'm just going to go through 3 different examples that we've adopted Lettersmith in to kind of give people an idea of the different ways that it could be used. So one place that it was used was in a technical communications course here, where people were writing like reports about the projects they were working on, as well as cover letters to, say, engineering jobs. So it's kind of like an intro to writing for engineering students. And so I'm just going to provide some quotes. So the instructor for this class said, once they actually get into the draft and they can see the tags on the left side of the screen and they can see an example on the right side of the screen, I noticed that they really seemed to resonate with a lot of them. They appreciated that they could see what was expected of them and then also a completed piece of how those things fit together. So one thing that I've asked students a couple of times is like, how do you see this different from, say, like if this instructor just provided you with 2 PDFs to look at and kind of go from there? And they said they liked seeing the examples matched with the checklist items. So we'll show this later, but each item on the checklist is highlighted in the example. So it's like a polite ask. What does that look like in the example? So it's kind of like broken down a little further. And so this particular instructor said it was really helpful to kind of break down seeing what students were tagging in their cover letters, because they would say like, oh, I realized that when I was explaining that students need to express how they could benefit the company when they're applying for the job, instead they were saying how the company would benefit them, which is like a very slight difference, but kind of seeing that the students didn't understand that point through their own tagging was useful. We can go to the next example. Another place that we've used this is in project-based courses where students need to work with a client outside of the university. And so this was one of the original ideas for using Lettersmith, where instructors I've spoken to before said, like, oftentimes when we have students reach out to their client for the first time, they don't introduce themselves, they don't say what class they're working with, they kind of just go right in, and the client who may have signed up is a little confused. And so having this kind of structure their first initial client communication, making sure that they have all the information in there, was really helpful in developing that relationship between students and the clients that they're working with. So one of the instructors said, this was modeling that I hadn't done in other classes. Like they could actually see what it was I was expecting. Any of the negative feedback that I get from students working with me is that things aren't clear. I kind of gloss over big concepts without helping them connect it. So it made it very clear that you should tell the students that, tell the client what you're interested in the project, and then give them exact language. So yeah, in this particular course, they have 3 different templates, one for just having the students introduce themselves to the client, another example of setting the agenda for the client meeting, and another showing how do you follow up from your first client meeting. And I want to emphasize that you don't have to use this tool for every single like piece of communication that you send to a client. It's more to kind of just like teach them what's expected in the beginning, and then that communication relationship will evolve from there. So yeah. And then the third example is for reading responses. So this is where I think an instructor in the English writing department was using it to help students structure their responses to reading that he was assigning in classes. And what was interesting is that he implemented the tool halfway through the class, where in the beginning he had students just kind of like write a response according to the rubric, and then he decided to try out this implementing Lettersmith to see if it changed the writing in any way. And so this instructor said, I could look at what students were tagging to try and kind of understand how each of them was grasping those individual concepts. I had one student who was continuously tagging what was actually the main argument as the context. And so we were able to have a conversation. It really helped me get into kind of their thinking and sort of on a one-on-one basis. So seeing how students were tagging their writing helped this instructor identify like, oh, the student kind of is like getting confused about what the different elements are. And so kind of being able to target where that misunderstanding is, help them iterate on their writing. And he said that the quality of writing, or what he was expecting from the responses, improved significantly after implementing the tool. So yeah, those are 3 places that we've implemented the tool so far, and we're always looking for more ways that it could potentially be useful in other instruction contexts. I also want to briefly summarize the student responses to using this tool. We've done like a very brief experiment in the past, and students or novice writers say who use this to write emails to clients. They said they're much more likely to send requests or send these emails written with the tool than if they hadn't used the tool. This is for context, I guess not clients, this is for like applying to jobs. Students who don't necessarily have a strong feedback writing network, or maybe they're like non-native English speakers and they don't know as many people who can have guided them throughout their life on about writing, or how to different ways of like writing job application materials. They found it useful to see the checklist and the examples. They like seeing examples of appropriate language. And while the tagging was useful for the instructors, I do want to say that students don't really like tagging their own work. So that's something that we're trying to figure out. But one quote from a student was, when you have a blank canvas, I think students don't know where to start. If you could kind of see how someone worded something, like how did someone ask for a meeting? How did they introduce time? If you can read how they worded that, it's more helpful. So that's one of the things that we were thinking of in the design of the tool was sometimes like as you all know, the blank screen or the blank canvas is really hard to get started on. So having like a mid-step to help them start writing their ideas down in like a certain format was helpful for them to get started. So yeah, I hope that was a useful overview of the different impressions of it.
So in our last little bit, I wanted to give you a little bit of a deeper look into what Lettersmith actually looks like and what the experience is of using it, both as the instructor and as a student. So let me stop. Let me share a new screen now. All right, will you give me a thumbs up if you can see the Lettersmith application at this point? It looks like I'm getting a couple, so awesome. So I'm gonna still use the cover letter example. One thing I'll mention about Lettersmith is, like Julie mentioned, you can customize and create your own templates, but we do have some default templates that every user automatically has access to. Those include this cover letter one that I'm going to show you, but also just sending out a cold email, as well as sending out a follow-up email. Those templates are available to every user who logs into Lettersmith. But you can, of course, create your own and share it with your own students or organization or whoever audience it is that you want to look at or work with. So as an instructor and as an owner of a template, I can see all of the different examples that have been submitted of this template. This is including any writing that's been done by a student or someone who's used this template. And once they're done with their writing sample, they can choose to share with others. So not only can they choose to share with others to get feedback, which is a different thing I'm going to show you in just a second, but they can also choose to share it with others and make it as an example. So that's what this particular writer has done. They did this actually this was last year. And so they wrote an example of submitting an application for an internship, and they could choose exactly what information they wanted to be anonymized. So they clearly wanted to take out some people's names or other personal information from this example. So they chose to tag specific aspects as anonymized. But I can read through this example. If I think this example is like a particularly compelling one that I should make available to everybody using this template, I can then approve that example. I can also see how many tags that they had. Obviously, not everyone uses every tag. That's one thing that I think can be interesting about students writing is we provide them a checklist of all the things that we think should be included in a cover letter, but they can choose to not use all of those aspects. And so you can sort of see how many of the tags that were actually used for this example. Then there's a whole bunch of examples. Like I said, this one's open to everybody. So there's tons and tons of examples. But in addition to seeing all those, I can also see all of the tags that accompany this type of writing. And this is where you could customize this to really fit whatever type of writing is appropriate for you. These, 6 elements are what we have considered critical for a cover letter. But obviously, if you wanted to make your own, even if it's another version of what you think is critical about a cover letter, you can edit these, delete these, reorder them, and do sort of whatever you want. As a faculty member, you can also have membership. This is going to take a super long time to load because it has like hundreds of people in it. Well, actually, it didn't take that long. So we must have sped that up quite a bit recently. But every person that can use this template can be added as a member. So if you're dealing with like a class or a specific cohort of people that you are wanting to have access to the template you've made, you can import those via CSV, or you can just add them individually. You can also have multiple owners or editors. So if you're working on something as a group or as an organization, multiple people can contribute to whatever it is you're doing. And then there's just like general settings. There's some new stuff in here we recently added, like being able to actually send an email from inside of Lettersmith. Our initial version, students could write their emails, but then they'd have to copy and paste the email into Gmail or whatever other application they want. Now students can not only send an email directly from inside the platform, but they can also export it as all different types of files, just so that it minimizes the amount of work they need to do to actually use whatever it is that they've written in Lettersmith. But the key experience for most users is the draft creation process. So I'm going to run through creating a draft really quickly of a cover letter. And so when I go to compose a new draft, this is the sort of screenshot that you were seeing earlier, where I see all of the different aspects of this writing on the left, and then I see where that's been used on the example on the right. So this particular example, we only have 2 of them that have been approved, but other templates have many more examples. It's really up to the individual instructor, which ones are visible to the end users. But as I select each one of these different components, I can see in the example where that was used. So if I really want to know, like, how do I describe my previous experience, I can see this example and exactly how they chose to do that. And then obviously I can do that for each one. This one, I'll use the connections here. and doesn't have a personalized statement, and I'm guessing has their contact information here. So I can sort of see that. I can write my own. So I'm not going to be a particularly good writer here on the spot, but just as an example. My name is James, and this email is not very good. Not very good. And so I imagine that this email is much better than it currently is. And I want to go on to the next step so that I can, well, actually, before I even do any of the tagging, one thing I want to show is that you can submit feedback. You can submit your writing to other people to get feedback. This was one thing I neglected to mention earlier when we were giving an overview of the application. So I'm going to do this now. And actually, I'm going to put this in the chat. And if you click on this link, you can give me feedback and leave me comments on this writing. And trust me, I won't be offended regardless of what you have to say. But one thing that students can do that is sometimes difficult is actually find out what other people think about what they've written before they send it. Obviously, if you're working as a group, you can work together to craft an email. But in situations like Julie mentioned earlier, where students either don't have somebody that they feel comfortable with, or English isn't their first language, or whatever the scenario is, they can share this link with anybody. They don't have to be at U of M. They don't have to have access or have used Lettersmith before. They can just send this link and send it and get feedback directly in the platform about what they might want to change. So I appreciate that constructive feedback, Julie. You didn't blast me like I sort of expected you to. I really, really thank you for that. And so, yeah, exactly. This is the kind of thing we want to be able to allow people to do. And this is one of the primary ways that instructors can also give feedback to students sort of in real time as they're completing their writing. So, I see this feedback and maybe I decide that I should add something about my program and that I'm a graduate student. And you can see all that and work on it in real time, right, as you would like. And then I can also, as I'm writing, say, all right, well, here is where I am personalizing my writing. And maybe this is what I say is my previous experience. And I can tag everything that I'm writing right in real time. So the idea is that I'm seeing my different examples of what else has happened in the platform. I'm getting feedback by people that I've shared the feedback link with. I'm tagging right as I'm writing. So I'm really thinking more constructively about how exactly I'm going to complete whatever writing task that I've been given. And then I can finalize this, and I have the option of either copying it to the clipboard and doing whatever I want to do with it, or I can send it as an email. Or if you saw when I was in the settings, I could give students the ability to download this as like a Word doc or whatever might be appropriate. So I'm actually just going to copy this to my clipboard because I'm not going to send this to anyone. This would be a very bad email if I tried to send it. But that gives you an example of sort of what Lettersmith can do, how you might be able to use it. As we're coming up on time, I do want to open it up if there are any additional questions or things that you want me to show in sort of the last couple of minutes. Let's see.
We have one question in the chat, and if others have questions, please feel free to put them there. So Catherine asked, how do you address the balance between using text in a template as a guide versus using someone else's writing as your own? Yes, and that's a great question, because I think we're thinking more about novice writers in the beginning, where they really aren't sure different ways of kind of wording something. So by providing different examples and different ways of wording, like a response or an email, we're hoping that people learn the kind of initial language, and then they can go from there based on like how they see someone structure it. But if you as an instructor like really don't feel comfortable providing an example, you can always hide that part of the feature and just use the checklist. But talking to students, I've asked them like if they really find the example useful, or if they just copy it, and they say that seeing the example that it's not always for their particular context, like they're not applying to the same job, but seeing that how someone else described their experience or described their interest in that position kind of help them at least come up with words here and there that to some extent might be like a little bit of copying, but yeah, it just helps them get started. And I guess I'm also thinking of like the kind of trajectory of learning where in the beginning, the first level of learning is kind of like mimicking. And then eventually once you understand all those concepts that you can use it in your own words. And so, yeah, I see it as just like a part of the process.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I do want to leave a couple minutes so that people can migrate to the keynote, which is starting at 1, if that's the thing you're interested in joining. So I really do appreciate you giving us this opportunity to tell you a little bit about Lettersmith. If you are interested in making use of Lettersmith in some way, I'm going to share a link in the chat to a innovation fund call for proposal that we're actually just launched earlier this week, where we are giving people an opportunity to propose different use cases for many of our tools. So if you're interested in getting some funding for your use of Lettersmith, please feel free to check out the Innovation Fund page that I've linked. And if you're interested in just talking to us more about Lettersmith, I will also share in the chat our email address, if I can get it really quick. Here it is. So if you want to just email us with general questions about Lettersmith, you can also ask us there, and we'll be happy to help you in whatever way. So we really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of the afternoon and the rest of Enriching Scholarship.
James.